Hi, thank you for joining us today. If you're already in, we've got about 5 minutes to go and we will get started right on time at 10 o'clock. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stacy Dad. I'm the Marketing and Communications Officer with the Florida SBDC at USF, and you are in Not Your Grandpa's Marketing Campaign, Media Advertising in Uncertain Times. We're joined today by Scott Carpenter, our marketing specialist at the Florida SBDC at University of South Florida, and Cas Huff. Wave for us, Cas. VP of Field Marketing at Spectrum Reach. I do want to give a special thank you to Spectrum Reach today, our title partner. They have done great things with us in the last year, and we're looking forward to the partnership moving forward in 2021. They have generously provided Cas to give us a little bit of insight into the world of media advertising for all of our small business owners. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We will stop at multiple points throughout today's webinar to take questions. So at any time, if you have a question, please type it into the question box in your control panel, which you should see on the right side of your screen. We will also have one poll. When it appears on the screen, just select your answer and we will share the results when the poll closes. We also have 3 handouts available for you in the handout section in the control panel. The first one is Ad Insights with Marcus Lemonis. That's actually an event presented by Spectrum as part of their Rebuild My Town campaign. It's coming up on January 12th, and I will also drop the link to register for that into the chat window later today. There's also SBDC General Services flyer, which tells you what it is the SBDC does if you're not familiar with us, and a coronavirus services flyer that can show you how we specifically are helping businesses through coronavirus, because we do have some discounted services at this point in time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, our moderator. It's all yours.
Thank you, Stacy, and good morning, everyone. I really appreciate you joining our seminar today. You know, when we were trying to come up with a title for this seminar with Cas, you know, we wanted to think a little bit outside the box because so much has changed in media. And, you know, the media that was bought 20, 30 years ago has changed so dramatically since then. And we're going to touch on several different points upon that today. So the media that your grandpa may have bought back as a corporate communications manager has dramatically changed, and we're going to talk about that. A little more housekeeping about who we are. Let me go to this slide right here. There we are. As Stacy was talking about, you can connect with the Florida SBDC at SBDC Tampa Bay. We have a lot of great information there, videos, blog topics, and a description of all of our services. We also, you can connect us with Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And some of the services that we offer are right there. Keep in mind that we're going to cover a lot of stuff today. And some of it you may not fully understand. And so what we would recommend is for you to schedule an appointment to come talk to an SBDC consultant at your convenience. We're doing everything virtually right now. Everything's online, so everything is safe. And we can cover all these topics on this list and a lot more. A little bit about me is that, you know, 16, 17, 18 years ago, I was very much like you guys. I was looking for SBDC assistance. I'm trying to start my own firm. I eventually did start my own marketing firm. And now I'm happily providing a consultation to SBDC clients. Here's Cas, VP of Field Marketing. You know, leads a pretty big team, and he's probably one of the more in tune people to today's media challenges, as well as television. But you know, keep in mind that television isn't so much more about television anymore, and there's so many other options that Spectrum can provide, and Cas will talk about that here in a second. Today's objectives are pretty broad, but we're going to drill down into many of these to gain an overview of the new tools every company has to promote its message, to understand the importance of strategy and message development, what are the new trends in consumer viewing, and that to understand that any company, any size can market themselves effectively. And we're going to get into that. So without further ado, Stacy mentioned a poll, and let's get to that poll. How many years have you owned your business?
I'll give you just a couple seconds here, about 5 more seconds to vote. How many years have you owned your business? If you're pre-venture, you are just an idea right now. All right, I'm going to close that poll. And the results, 13% of you are pre-venture, so you're in the idea stage, 29% are 1 to 3 years, 21% 4 to 10 years, and 38% of our audience is 10 plus years in business. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so it's always best to start at the beginning, and before we get too far into it, we've already got or received several questions from people who couldn't attend today's seminar live. So a couple of questions have already come through. So one of the first questions to Cas was, Cas, how has the media changed over the years?
Sure. Well, first off, Scott, Stacy, and full SBDC, thank you so much for having me today. So greetings from Nashville. Excited to be here. Excited for the new year. And the poll's exciting to see. You see how long a lot of these businesses have been ran, and so you saw 38% was 10 plus years. A lot of changes in 10 plus years, but I would say that the ones that have been in business for 1 to 3 years have seen a lot of changes. From a competitive standpoint, the tools that are out there, the way that they're able to compete, the way that they're able to broaden their business over a local aspect has definitely changed over the years. And I would also say from a marketing standpoint, the way that you have to reach viewers, the way that viewers consume content, the way that you have to stand out from those competitors has definitely changed. Television that used to be television on the wall is now a television that's in your pocket. It's a television that's on your computer. It's a television that's on your iPad. It's something that you can watch and consume wherever you are. And I think that's one of the exciting pieces, is that such a big brand builder isn't just limited anymore. It's something that small businesses can take advantage of in a lot of new ways.
That's great. Which as one of the first things when we were sharing information, Cas gave me this slide. And he's so right. Brand matters, and it's really important to understand that even with the best media buy, if your brand is irrelevant, it's going to be lost in the clutter, and your marketing dollar is going to go down kind of the drain. So brand does matter, and so where to begin? For the beginning marketer, or even for an established brand who's been struggling, is to understand your brand position. And the SBDC can assist companies looking to help with their brand position, so that when you get to that stage of wanting to buy media, it will certainly be a stronger case. And for a brand position, we have a little description there about the communication and services of value to customers, so they can easily make the connection between their needs and wants with what the product has to offer. And it can be a slogan. Cas, you know what that one is, right?
I do. I recognize the Big Mac, and hopefully the group that's on the call could even, if I was to go through and say 2 all beef patties, lettuce sauce, pickles, cheese, right? I mean, people understand. Right, and remember those ingredients. And the last time that they aired that commercial was over 30 years ago on television. So that shows you the power of messaging and building a brand and having a slogan that's memorable.
Right, and other companies do it other ways. Corona expresses their brand as an attitude. When you think of Corona, you think of beach, lifestyle, fun, instant vacation. Okay, that's the brand that they want to do, and so they're presenting their brand as an attitude, and so there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and it's important to understand your brand and position to develop the importance of messaging and content to be able to share with your people, your potential customers, and also too, it's important to have realistic goals, objectives, and budget. And Cas, can you talk a little bit about that when customers have come to you with unrealistic goals, objectives, and budget, and what does that do to them?
Okay, sure. Well, great question, and I think the points you're making here, Scott, are really important. For businesses of all sizes. So an important piece to understand is that everybody has a brand. You know, it's not a question of, do I have a brand? It's a question of, are you going to manage your brand? So what do people think about when they think about you? The slide you had before, you know, it showed a Coca-Cola versus a Sam's Cola. And I don't know if this happens in Florida, but here in Nashville, we have what we call a potluck. And if you were to go to a potluck, you would see those two sitting side by side, and you can guess which one would be empty first, right? And it's always the Coca-Cola. Even more important, they're willing to pay more dollars to take a Coca-Cola off of the shelf versus the competitor because of the power of that brand. And so I think, you know, the first piece to know is you have to manage your brand. We brought a brand specialist around to work with businesses, because at Spectrum Reach, you know, what we do is we try to help businesses. We are here to help businesses market, promote, and to grow. And so we'll bring in specialists to have discussions. And one of the things that Jerry O'Brien said, and we were down in that area, is know your because, right? Can you help customers understand your because? And you should pick me because you should pick my central heat and air unit because of this. And so make sure you're clear on that, and then get that message where it's able to go out. And I think as you talk about goals and objectives and those pieces, you have to understand what you're trying to drive, what you're trying to accomplish. And a big piece of that is knowing, you know, who you're for. What is your business and your product for? And then as you start to do your media, what's it for? Because there's so many different options for how you market, how you promote. And as you start to set goals and objectives, you have to be realistic about where you're starting, right? You know, you've a lot of times, based on limited budget, that means you have to limit the amount of frequency that you have, meaning how often you run it, the length of time, the exposure, your coverage area. So, you know, most businesses draw a lot of their customers in from a 15-mile radius. So can you actually come in and be inside that 15-mile radius versus trying to hit the full DMA and the full market or going national? And so you start small with the expectation of what would you expect to drive based on what you have as far as resources. But it's so important to know the messaging is a big part of that. Then you start to get into the media and some of the other channels.
Right. And another important aspect of knowing your media campaign is to really understand your audience. And, you know, an important aspect is audience segmentation. And audience segmentation is really being able to drill down into who your key prospect is, because not every consumer is your key prospect. Not everybody wants to buy a hamburger. Not everybody wants to buy a motorcycle. Not everybody wants your go to your nail salon. And so audience segmentation is so important. And you know, and that's and Cas can talk about this, with so much data out there about who is consuming media, who is watching media. Operations like Spectrum and Cas's team can really help customers dig down into what their segmentation is. Is that correct, Cas?
Yeah, definitely so, Scott. And we really feel this is one of the things that we can be most helpful around, because it is important. Everybody typically tends to think that their product is for the world, right? If you ask somebody who's your target customer, they'll say everybody. But if you're a coffee shop, right, and you have the best coffee in the world, there's some people that don't like coffee, right? There's people that are not willing to pay $4 or $5 a cup for coffee. So understanding who that group is and starting to work to a viable audience and get to that group, you know, is really critical. So you understand, one, who wants to use your service, who's your most likely customer, and then you really target against that customer. And what you find is you don't waste your dollars, because if you cast that wide net, when you should be fishing with a hook, you know, what you find is you're spending a lot of money and you're bringing in a reduced amount of return for what you're putting out into the marketplace. So we think it's important to know their habits, know their trends, know their areas, and then know what they're consuming, you know what they're watching, because, you know, when you start to get into networks, right, ESPN isn't for everybody, and it costs more to reach the audience at ESPN sometimes. You know, maybe your audience is an HGTV type audience, right? And so understanding how you get into those channels where the viewers are and build that consistency, that frequency, so they see your message and you start to build it. Real quickly, one other thing that you said is not everybody's in the market. And that's important. And they may not be in the market for the moment, but one of the strong things about building your brand is they may be in the market for that motorcycle that you mentioned, Scott, 5 years from now. And so that's some of the power of starting to build a brand, but also, not just doing something for that person right at that moment. You start to establish yourself as the motorcycle dealer. So when they are in the market 3 years from now or 5 years from now, they think about you and they come to you. And so there's a lot of value in that as well. So I would always recommend to businesses, think about the short-term audience, but also think about that longer leash and build it as you grow.
Right. And we were talking about trends a little bit earlier. What's been some of the biggest trends in audience segmentation that you guys are using to help customers find that key prospect that maybe hasn't heard of them or doesn't know about their service, but should know about their service?
Okay, yeah, really good question. And of course, as you mentioned, audience segmentation, right, and closer targeting. Used to be television was a very broad tool, and so you threw that net out there, and it was a lot more expensive to handle it that way. The trends of today are to start to understand what people are watching, and knowing that if you can't be in the March Madness, if you can't afford to be in the football college playoff, in the championship game, and that doesn't make sense for your business, that same audience with a lot of today's technology and tools and information, you can start to go, that audience is also watching before the game these clips and these pieces of information, or they're also watching this other thing. So what you're able to do is find that duplicative audience in things that are more budget friendly and more targeted for exactly what you want to do. And that was the technology television hasn't always had, but in today's world, we have actually Spectrum Reach, a tool called Audience App that helps you understand it. And I see you're putting up some screens here around really kind of how the TV works, and I think you'll click ahead. And this is some recent data around how people are actually consuming television, because we spoke about it's not just the television that is on the wall or in your living room, it goes with you. However, that baseline of television is still a really important piece of how people consume it. And I think sometimes the way that people perceive it is that it's changed so much and they start to shift all their money away from really that baseline and that foundation. So you see here that 58% of people watch TV and streaming TV regularly. And I think a lot of the group that's on this call today can think about their own habits and what they see in their own household and start to see that, yes, this is the way that we consume it. But it also goes across things like on-demand viewing, watching the different network apps. So whether you're a Spectrum subscriber or you're an Xfinity subscriber, some of the others, people are still watching that same television in other places. And so if you start to go that 14% are streaming TV only, then what you have to start doing is, should I start to build into my schedule an appropriate amount tied to that on top of this foundation? And that's one of the things that a lot of our, in our local markets, we have account executives that can walk through that process. They can use a tool like an Audience App to show them how people are consuming television and build a television schedule that's not too heavily weighted one way or the other, so that they have wasted dollars or they have a lot of missed exposure.
Right. That's great insight, because I think most people would be surprised that 23% is that low, versus most people would probably think it'd be much higher than that, because that's traditional TV. And again, that's why it's important to be able to understand who your audience is and what influences them. And so, like what Cas was talking about with his account executives and leaders, is that the question that always needs to be asked is, if you had $1 to spend for marketing against which audience, who would you do it against and why? And that makes your ad budget that much more focused if you could really understand that. And then coupled with the brand position of really an impactful message that impacts them emotionally with a solution that has not been authored yet, offers that. So I think that is a great way to present that. Stacy, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. So Joan asks, how do you keep advertisements eye-catching and simple, but also informative? Any suggestions?
Okay. Sure. Well, thanks for the question, Joan. And that's a big one. The creative, as you've just heard, is so important. and not everyone is creative, right? And sometimes ads, if you think about the ads that you see on TV, there's those memorable ads that one of my favorites now is Progressive and the Becoming Your Parents. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. Geico has done some great work. Peloton has done some great work out there. So I think, Joan, the answer to that question, and for all the group on the call today is, invest in your creative and someone to help you get that story right. It starts with knowing your because, and then how do you creatively tell that in a way that's eye-catching, that's engaging, but it also gets the point across that says they are speaking to me as a customer, right? So you have to get their attention, because if it's all about details and specifics, a lot of times what you'll see is people just gloss over it, right, mentally in their mind. But it's a very important question, and there's a lot of creative services. At Spectrum Reach, we have a kernel group that can come out and they actually help you script it. They help you work through that. They add the graphics for you and can help do it. There's other sources around. I'm sure Scott has been able to do some things, but getting that creative right a lot of times starts with knowing who you are, knowing what separates you from the pack, getting something that's eye-catching, creating that's fun, that speaks to that audience, right? Not every audience is fun, right? If you're talking about banking, taxes, right? There's other things that are more solid, foundational versus fun in some other areas. So making sure it's the right appropriate piece, but it also conveys that difference that makes them want to select you versus the other competition. And then I think it becomes having that schedule so they're exposed to that message repeatedly and it starts to sink in. And Joan, just one other thought is, one thing that people do a lot of times is they'll do one creative piece, and Scott, I'm sure you've seen this with some of the businesses that you work with, and they'll leave it out there forever, for years, right? It's the same message or the same piece that they've had for a while. Freshening that up roughly quarterly also draws them back in. So even if it has an underlying theme and sense to it, freshening that up also pulls them back in, and it helps to build on top of that message over time.
Right. I would add two things to that. I totally agree with Cas. Is one, you can be as creative as all you want to, but at the end of the day, it's all about the message. Because how many times have you seen a really, really cool ad? Hey, do you remember the thing about the monkey? But you can't remember the brand. You can't remember the takeaway. So it's all about the message behind the creativity that you presented as. And two, I always encourage my clients to research the competition, see what they're doing, see what they're talking about, because you don't want to be talking what they're talking about. You don't want to be showing a same commercial that looks like any other commercial. That's usually what I call the sea of sameness, where everybody looks the same, tastes the same, prices the same. And so you need to break out of that clutter with something different that is still unique to you, but shown a different way. Stace?
Okay, Sean asks, regarding segmentation, once you have the segmentation, what do you do with it?
Okay, good question, Sean, right? And that is important. So you know who you want to speak to. And so, Sean, you could actually probably think about yourself, right, and what you do, and think about people that are like you, your friends, right, the people you interact with. And if that's the audience you're trying to reach, how are they consuming media? Where are they? Because there's different channels. So there's a media placement world, which is on television. So certain networks, certain things that you would put your message onto. You also usually would have a social, right? So for your business, how are you using social, which is a different product. There's a different way. It's more of a conversation piece with your audience. Do you have database opportunities? So do you already have existing customers in your business that you can use your database to speak to those customers? So if you're trying to grow their purchases, right, alongside of trying to grow your audience, that's a good way to do it. There's different things like events and other places that you can put your business, that you can show up and that you can track it. So as you know who your brand is, you know the audience that you want to reach, where are they? And then how do you reach them through these different channels? So there's things like television networks that you know that they would advertise on. There's the social platforms and the way they might be interacting there. There's your existing database, and then where are those locations in other places? And so inside your budget, that's kind of the balance I think that most businesses have to figure out is, where do I start? Where do I get the most return? To Scott's questions about if I had $1, where do I actually start to get the best return for the spend that I have? And hopefully over time, Sean, it's something that you really grow on and can do more and more and expand more and more.
All right, Scott.
That's all right. I would add to that as well. You know, the importance of segmentation is that once you have a defined customer set that you want to go after, that is your best of the best types of customers you want to reach. And let's say you're in Tampa, you're in Naples, you're in Orlando, but you want to be able to expand to Phoenix, LA, Chicago. The importance of that segmentation is to where you can work with Cas's team or a media placement team, insert name here. But they would be able to help you pick what are the best new markets for you based upon your core segmentation. And Cas, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, and that's a really good point, Scott. Is you know, to that question, a lot of times, you know, small businesses are running their business, right? And that's why they got into it, is they have a passion for the business that they do. Marketing isn't necessarily where the passion comes from, but customers are lifeblood of any business and business growth. So a lot of times bringing in that partner that can really help you with that, so you are not having to go home after a day's work and research and do other pieces. So as Scott mentioned, you know, Spectrum Reach, an account executive can sit down, show you the audience segmentation. And once you start to see that, then you'll start to see different ways that you can do it. You have a creative team that can help you with creative messaging. And I know we'll speak a little bit differently about measurement, because that's another important piece too, as you start to define your audience, reach your audience, what is really working, and how do you fine tune and optimize that over time. And the right partner makes such a big difference in being able to get that accomplished.
Sean said thank you. We've got 2 more questions for this segment of today. Samantha asks, what is the best way to find your target audience? Is it just the people buying or those just looking as well? So for instance, Instagram followers, is that important?
Sure. Well, good question, Samantha. And, you know, I think there's always the temptation to go after the people that are buying immediately, right? So there's an audience right now that's in the market for a home. There's a market of someone right now in the market for a Ford F-150 truck. And so there's always a tendency to target very specifically to that handful, which is a very small, very segmented group, and they're very hard to reach effectively, right? I mean, there's certain things you can do around buying lists. And so if you have access and you know that group using an Instagram, using some social media, using some things like that, there can be some value. But there's also a lot of studies that show for your media investment over time that if you invest in building your brand as that person, right? So, or that company that delivers. So I am the hardware store. I am the lawyer in the market, right? I think almost everybody could probably relate to a lawyer that has built a brand in their marketplace. And when you need one, you think about them, or a medical center, a furniture store. If you build that brand over time, not everybody is in the market for furniture right now today. It's a very small group, but over time, they will start to get there. The other thing about building your brand with some of your deeper funnel media placement that you'll see is you can also create demand, right? Not everybody might not be thinking about having a burger for lunch. However, when you put that out there, it might actually change their thinking for the day, and they go, hey, we need to stop by there this week, and you can drive that traffic. Or they might think, you know, I wasn't really thinking we needed a new dining room set. However, as I look at that, it creates that demand that helps all your stuff work deeper. So I think the balance, Samantha, is to find, you know, where do I get myself positioned with the immediate buyers, but how do I also have a longer term strategy, which, you know, the research shows that makes your media spend work about 18% harder, which is a big advantage. If you think about your competitor in that space, and every dollar you spend works 18% harder than what their spend because you've worked on your brand, over time, you'll see that lift where you'll go up like this and they'll stay on this type of trajectory. So I'd say that balance could be very critical for you and for any business.
Right, and I would add too that just there's a lot of good insight and research that you can do, a lot of good A/B testing that you can do through even just online ads. Yeah, Spectrum has a lot of good market research into it. So I think you start by assuming or trying to determine who you think your key prospect is, do a little bit of testing, do a little market research, and really hone that in, and so that you're not spending, as we were talking about before, not everybody is your audience. So it's important to be able to do as much market research as you can, and Spectrum has a lot of great information that they can share on what the market has to bear.
Thanks, guys. And our final question for this segment is from Sherry. And I'm going to ask this because I know she is not the only person thinking this in the audience. How can you do this on a $0 budget?
Well, that is tough, Sherry. And a lot of times businesses think they have a $0 budget, right? And that's typically when someone starts to inquire and you say, well, what kind of budget are you working with? A lot of small businesses will say, well, I don't really have a budget for marketing and for advertising. And so, I think the important thing is there's not a lot that you actually can do with a zero marketing budget to really increase your trajectory over time. So you have to start to think about, how can I put some dollars toward the marketing and promotion for my business? Now, there are steps, as I'm sure the group on this call today know, around how you show up at different events, how you sponsor some small pieces and get started. And a lot of times what businesses find is they start to stack up all these dollars in small ways that are really scattered out there. And all of a sudden they're spending $500, $1,000 in ways that they wouldn't say, well, I really don't have any marketing budget. But there's a lot of money that's going to sponsor little different flyers and people that walk through the door and other things that go on. So Sherry, the recommendation I might make, and definitely I understand where you're coming from, is start to think about what your goals are, understand exactly where you are, and then go, how do I start to grow it? So do I start to work with my database? Do I start to work with some of the social media, right? It's free social media that we have inside of there. But over time, how do I start to get a return back that we can then invest and start to grow and grow and grow? Because it ultimately comes down to your business goals as well, right? If there are businesses that feel fine with where they are for the day, right, or for the current time. The challenge becomes, as I'm sure a lot of the businesses that have been here for more than 10 years know, that tends to change, right? Nothing stays exactly the same. You're usually either going forward or you're going backwards. And so if your goal is to move forward, how do we start to invest? Start to do some of the things that get your face and your brand and your other thing done. But I would say, Sherry, and I know I'm probably going long here, Scott, focus on who you are and what your brand is. Start to get in front of that audience as best you can with what you have available to you, but have a plan longer and longer to invest and grow, because it really is critical to if you want to grow in a crowded marketplace, which almost any marketplace is now with some of the bigger competitors that are online out there now.
Right. I totally agree. I think to the question, I think it's important for any company to think of marketing as an investment, not a cost center. That's where companies get into trouble, where they're worried about how much it's going to cost versus the actual return on the investment they're going to get. Cas mentioned social media. Social media and the use of social media consistently using can help you with audience segmentation. You can see who's following you, see who's sharing your information. You can do little boosts and other perks to promote your message out and see who's responding to it. So social media is a great way to do it on a very, very to no budget. And as an old tried and true PR guy, media relations is totally free. You can send a news release to your local papers, send it to the media, and that costs nothing to do. And some people would say, the PR people would say, that an article written about you is 10 times more valuable than a single ad. And so look at public relations opportunities to see what local editors are talking about and see how your product and your offering fits within what they might be able to talk about. So I would look into that.
Scott, I'm going to turn things back over to you. Questions are still rolling in, and guys, please keep asking those questions. Whatever we don't get to today, we will answer offline as well. So keep rolling your questions in. It's all yours.
Again, great questions. And Cas started to talk about this in our last one. Most people, when they think about television, broadcast media, think about the big networks. and I think that was Stephanie's question, how do you do this with hardly any budget or no budget? But as we were talking about, this is not your grandpa's media networks anymore. And so there are so many different things that now we can do. And Kaz, if you want to go through your diagram here and talk about all the various options that people have beyond just network TV to be able to really effectively promote their brand.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Scott, and I do think this is a good one when you think about the changes of television and not being your grandpa's television anymore. Which, if only it were, right? It used to, in the days when I started, which were a while back, and I am a grandpa, so I witnessed those days of television. What you had, it was easier to reach because people had fewer opportunities to consume other things. They had fewer things to do. They had fewer distractions, and you could reach bigger audiences in one place. You could put an ad years ago in the New York Times, and it would be the spot. When I first started, the local newspaper and the Yellow Pages were the two biggest competitors out there. Those times have changed, and there's a lot of other ways. But I think what's important on this slide, Scott, and for the group is really if you look at those key words around how is your awareness? Because again, if you have the best coffee in town and nobody knows about it, it doesn't do you much good. So if you think about how do I drive awareness? How do I make them consider me versus the offer? How do I make them choose me versus my competition? And ultimately, how do I start to drive purchase? And then once you get them inside of there, then you can really work on building that loyal base where you create fans and you have people that will go out and talk about your product, which is once you get to that loyalty stage, that is really where you've got marketing Shangri-La. That is, you have people that are out there giving your message. You mentioned a little bit with PR, right? That's one of the perks of stories. If you have a third party talking about you in a positive way, that's what you'd like to see. But it starts with that awareness. So making sure people are aware of you, and television is the driver of awareness. When you talk about brands like Geico and Progressive, and even in your area, just a few years ago, that area was Bright House, and we're Spectrum now, and it's been rebranded. And hopefully the group here has seen things like Spectrum Mobile products. So you have to make people aware, and then inside your messaging is where you get that consideration. And then again, your because becomes that preference. Why would they select you? And once they do that, then are there certain other platforms, media that are more deeper funnel, right? So all your awareness is top. So you're trying to get to your viable audience that you can get to, and you get tighter and tighter for those people that, we had the question a little bit ago about, where do you invest with people that are in market spending right now versus, others that may spend down the road. Once you start to get into purchase, those are the ones that are spending money in the market right now. And so you want them to actually take that. So there's those certain channels that will drive that there. And it's something that a Spectrum reach, from television to digital to the multi-screen to the creative. Again, with the right partner, you can get to this whole piece and then establish that loyalty that's going to make you a strong brand and a strong company long term.
Right. Yeah, Kaz, one of the questions that I had received was, a client had talked to not Spectrum, but somebody else, and had received a whole bunch of information regarding many of the titles that you have on the screen: online video, social smart ads, OTT, premium video, and they were confused. They know broadcast TV. They see a 30-second spot, but they don't understand all these other new options. And again, since these are all new things that most people don't know about, can you highlight some of the where some of these things will live and how they operate?
Okay, sure, yeah. And again, it can get confusing, right? It is hard to keep up with what is out there now. So television is what you would consider, and we showed the graph earlier about the amount of time people still spend consuming television, which again, I think is a perception. Everybody thinks everybody's already moved over here, but really the block of it is there. So that's your baseline where you can catch most people, create the most awareness, which is why you see that first. When you get into things like online television and online video, we also understand people aren't just sitting in front of their computers and doing it. They're watching an app. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, and my son plays sport. So a lot of times I'm watching a Georgia football game on my phone while I'm watching him play his sport. And probably a lot of the group on here have done the exact same thing. Or hopefully they haven't done this, but been at a wedding on a Saturday, right? And they're trying to keep up with the scores and stuff. So, we understand people are doing that, and that's a great option. That's one of the strongest things about it not being grandpa's television. Is used to it was limited to one piece, but now you can actually follow that audience and the way that they consume. And so when you work with a partner and you get into online video, when you start to get into things like social smart ads and pieces like that, that is really buying impressions. So, and really television and everything you're seeing here starting an impression, which for the group, if you're not aware, an impression means my ad is exposed, how many people are in front of that face to face. So that's an impression. So television can work that way now. Display ads, smart ads can all work that way. So it means I'm buying the opportunity to make sure that that people are viewing it. And so it typically comes in CPMs, which is by the 1,000 views. But you can start to buy deeper like that. And then of course, search becomes as they're looking for you, which a lot of your awareness consideration drives people to search. So how do I make sure that my list comes up at the top? So work with your website can do that. It's another place that Spectrum Reach has some options to help you through that process all the way through. But definitely it's confusing. But if you start to think of it as that kind of core television, but also the television that's not in your living room, and then deeper into your funnel when people are actually getting closer and closer to, I want to click a button and make a purchase, or I want to do a search and find that location or that phone number. Those are all pieces that carry you through this graph that you see here.
Right, and I think that's great insight. You know, I've always been a fan of over-the-top TV buys, premium videos, because the consumer has to watch it. They have to watch the video before they move on. And you know, over-the-top is, to me, is you know, again, I think that's going to be a growing phenomenon. I just love that over-the-top. And essentially, and Cas, correct me where I'm wrong, but over-the-top allows you to pick zip codes, allows you to pick home, if you just want to reach households. You know, we go back to segmentation. This is where your segmentation is so important, because over-the-top allows you to hit specific households with just your message. And so, for instance, if you're in a household that's not in my zip code, you wouldn't see my ad. But that's okay, because I only want to market within 5 miles from my store. And to me, over-the-top is almost like, I call it TV direct mail, because you're able to target almost that precisely with your TV spots. Am I pretty on target there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, and really one of the things that some of the group may not know is that's one of the powers really of a cable television type schedule is it is actually zoned to certain areas. And so you're pretty close. So if you know that 80% of your audience, right, of your customers come from 15 miles, you can actually buy 15 miles or so around your store with even television based on a zone schedule. Then you add even more targeting, as you mentioned, to that 13%, because when you talk about over the top and other television viewing that's online, if you know 13% of people are watching it, you're missing 13% if you don't add that into that other schedule, right? You also know that you're missing that other 60, 70% that are watching television if you don't buy that schedule. So the closer you can get that target in, the better you're able to manage your budget, the better you're able to segment very specifically to your audience and the people that are going to be most likely to purchase from you. And so that mixture that you're talking about, Scott, is really critical. But exactly right, you can get very tight with your audience.
Right, and to finish this one subject on platforms, on scheduling, the back end portion that Spectrum provides on where your ads are running, who's watching your ads, who consumes your ads. It goes back to, I love the fact where you can pull down and pull by zip code how many people were exposed to your ad. Can you talk about some of the back end functionality of the schedule part of it?
Sure, and that's important. I mean, in the old days, right, in Grandpa's television days, you cast the net out and you really just measured how your cash register rang. And as everybody on this call knows, there's seasonality, there's things that happen in the business environment. And so it was a very imperfect way of measuring. In today's world, you actually have a lot of tools. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about measurement now in a few minutes, but there's a tool that's Audience Track that actually lets a customer go in and see and verify when their schedule ran, how it's performing. And that's so critical to actually be able to go in and see that it's not just I ran a spot last night, you can start to see a lot more about the impressions that were delivered. There's a piece called Lift that we can actually help discuss about measurement, which means I saw your ad, but I saw it 2 weeks ago, or I was exposed to it five days ago and 7 times, and then I came in a month later. So some of those lift metrics are some really strong television pieces that you used not to have access to, that today we could help any business understand how that looks and see what their impact is, so they can truly measure the return on their schedule.
Yeah. Great. Stacy, do we have any questions on platform?
Well, not necessarily on platform. We do have a specific question for Spectrum. Christina would like to know, what are the different programs for marketing that Spectrum has, and do you have special pricing for small local businesses to help them get started in a marketing program or anything of that nature?
Okay. Well, hey, Christina, thank you for the question. And we all know the year that we just came through, and as mentioned, Spectrum Reach is about helping businesses, and so we all took a pivot last year, and hopefully a lot of you on this call heard about Rebuild My Town, which was an effort that we undertook, which the idea was, how do we create something to help businesses? And so we definitely had several programs that had discounted advertising. We have at rebuildmytown.com, there's a free directory that we've let businesses get in. We've had opportunities for discounted creative and commercials. And a lot of those are actually still available. So Christina, there in your market, we definitely could have someone talk to you about some of the discounted opportunities that are right now as we go into 2021. They could talk to you about some of the Rebuild My Town opportunities that are out there, and some of the creative opportunities to help you get started. So yes, definitely. And really laying even on top of that with an account executive to help talk through your specific needs, your specific business category, your specific geography, and some of the others. So if you take all that together, Christina, I think there's a lot that you can explore, and a lot of good help for your business and really any business out there right now, because we understand how tough it is, and how tough it's been for small businesses. And that's been our primary goal, is, how do we help?
Okay, I've got a 2-part question from Emmanuel. It says, target market campaign. Would you think hiring a marketing company that advertises on all platforms, social media, etc., is a good investment, or hiring an SEO or Google AdWords is a better investment? I would say It depends on the campaign and the target, but go ahead.
Well, Emmanuel, as I mentioned years ago, Yellow Pages was always the toughest competitor. And the way that I consider search and SEO, those are people that are already actively taking a look for a product, right? So they're very close to that purchase funnel. So as mentioned, there's a lot of good work that you could do on your website, and there's a lot of companies that could help. But I think you would want to, the recommendation I would make is, I would think you would want somebody to help you with a full marketing plan all the way through that search piece. So as you see on the screen here, there's stuff from TV all the way through search, and the creative piece, which isn't necessarily listed, as well as social, as well as smart ads, as well as impressions, that a company like a Spectrum Reach can help talk through every one of those solutions, and actually could offer you every one of those solutions top to bottom inside that funnel. Hopefully you're picking up, I'm a big believer in brand and the importance of creative, and making sure that's the right place before you start to get into it. So often, so many people go straight to the bottom and go, well, if there's people that are looking for, if there's people that are out there looking for a lawyer, I just want to be right there. But it's almost like being at a grocery store and giving all the credit to the person checking you out for all the sales that are taking place at that grocery store. There's a lot of other things that take place. So I would say, as you consider your marketing strategy, start with your goals, start at the top, start with who you are, and that close to the funnel, which I know there's always temptation to kind of be there, but put a full plan together, or at least explore that full plan and see how it might fit into your budget and your own personal goals. Start there at least, and then you can see what's available to you.
Right, and I totally agree with that. And I'd also suggest that having one firm be in charge of your brand, I think is critical. So many times, if you work with several different firms, each one has a different take on what your brand is. And so all of a sudden, TV ads may personify a blue shirt, whereas print ads or social or PR makes it look like a red shirt, and there's a disconnect with your audience. So I think it's important to have one firm, but I also think it's important to have the right firm. So just because one firm does, A to Z and the kitchen sink doesn't mean they're good. This means they offer a lot of stuff. So I would encourage everybody to look for a comprehensive firm that specializes in your industry and has a track record of producing success.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as you saw, where we have a team that markets all across the country. Also, the broader you get with partners that you work with from a financial standpoint and a payment standpoint and keeping up with all the different pieces, it can get pretty complex. So looking for that one-stop shop, can also just be very helpful for you for your own bookkeeping and payroll and getting your reporting that ties together in one location versus having 10 different reports that all tell you different things.
Right, and some firms will also give you a price break. So if you go to 5 different firms, you're going to get their top of the line prices for all those 5 different projects versus a bundled price where an agency might be able to assist you with that, and which also goes back, I think, Stephanie's question about how do we save money or do it more cost effectively.
Okay, Carol would like to know, can you explain Spectrum's addressable option?
Okay, sure. Well, hey, Carol, thanks for the question. And that's a very tech savvy question there when you talk about addressable advertising. And it's been a word that's been around for a while. There are no companies that have to be more aware of privacy really than a company like Spectrum. But one of the opportunities that we do have is with anonymized data and information that's aggregated and things like that. What we can do is with some other third-party information, you start to know homes that have certain characteristics and trends. And so in a very confidential way, there's also the ability to start to reach homes that have certain propensities as car owners, or certain areas. Scott, you mentioned it with some of the over the top options. So there's some ways definitely to handle that addressable advertising so that it hits certain households. And in some markets, there's companies that are even looking at things like different ads appearing on different television sets in the house, right? So if there's a propensity to watch HGTV, right, with I'm in the living room, right, and the kids watching Nickelodeon in some of the other rooms, that you're hitting even closer to home like that. So addressable is an exciting and interesting way to take advantage of that television schedule. And so, Carol, we'd be happy to talk to what's available in your area. Scott talked earlier about how we can look at different markets and expand it. So we'd be happy to talk to you about some of those options. But it's a very targeted way of linear television targeting that really works well with some of the OTT options we have as well, and putting creative messages. So a different message could go to a home that that actually owned let's just say that it's a home that had a Ford F-150. You already knew that they owned it. You could actually send a service message into that household versus a sales message into that household, or it's time to upgrade. So there's some exciting options inside of there.
Last question for this segment. I've actually gotten a couple of these questions on the back end here. It's, how expensive is TV, or how does TV compare when it comes to social pricing? And my take on that is it's really easy to waste money no matter what platform you're on. It's really easy to spend thousands of dollars on Google Ads and get nothing out of it because it's not targeted right, it's not set up correctly. So anything either of you have to say regarding cost?
Sure, and I'm not surprised you got that question because there definitely is a perception that television advertising is expensive. I haven't heard what this year's Super Bowl ads will cost, but you're typically looking at $4 or $5 million. But a lot of it ties back to to what Scott. There you go, spin and reach. So how many people are you reaching with that, and the manner that you reach them with motion and sound and other pieces? It's so much more impactful in a lot of ways. And you know, Scott mentioned it earlier, right? I mean, when you're doing your marketing and you're doing your messaging, it's really not looking at it as a contribution, right, to who you're working with. It is an investment in how you want to grow. So if a part of your marketing plan is to build from the screen before that awareness to a bigger audience, then that costs more money. And so how do you get into that world? You can start very cost effectively with a targeted schedule to the right audience across the right network, and make television something that fits almost any budget. And I would recommend it for anyone to get that chance, because there's a lot of credibility that comes with the television schedule, with people seeing you on television. It separates you from all those deeper funnel pieces. So if I saw this person on television, I have more faith in their business than one that I just see their name and I've never heard anything about them or seen anything else. And so it makes you a better preference. So I guess, you know, to get to the question of it, it can be. It's how aggressive that you want to be, but you should always see good return. So anything from a cost benefit. So if you spend more and invest more, a company like Peloton made an investment a few years ago to go aggressively with the television schedule. They were a very small company. Almost nobody had heard of them. I would imagine almost everybody on this call today has now heard of Peloton, and they're $1 billion company, and they were perfectly positioned for kind of the environment that we're in now. They made investments in television and awareness and other pieces. You can do it. They did it nationally. You can do it inside your neighborhood, right, with some of the targeted options that we talked about. So you can start out a lot more cost effectively.
Right. So Cas, as we start to talk about, and this goes back to a question before about, you know, how do you create the budget and how do things cost and all this. So when a client comes to you and says, you know what, I'm pretty firm on my segment, okay, but how much is it going to cost? What factors do you guys look at to come back with a solid recommendation, regardless of what size company they are? But what tools do you guys use to show how you can increase that lift? How can you increase that brand awareness of your client's product?
Okay. Yeah, and this is an important one, right? And I think it's come through in the question already around, you know, how do we manage budgets? Is it expensive? And so, you know, as you look at a media budget for the year ahead, it starts with your personal goals. What are you trying to drive? What are your personal KPIs? Because almost everybody on this call has something different that they're measuring. If I'm a community college, right, is it new enrollees? Is there certain areas? Is there certain other pieces? Am I wanting to sell products that have higher return than other products? And so I think understand what you want to drive, because that's going to be important to how you spend your money out there, because it is a very different approach to get more of your current customers to spend more money with you than it is to double your customer base size and bring people in. So I think you should know as that owner or as that marketer what you're trying to accomplish, and that's going to help a lot with your budget, because each one of the channels that we saw earlier do different pieces. So then how much do I allocate then to brand building, right? And so when you start to think about creating that budget, it becomes like, so I want to do television, and I know that I'm a realtor, and I want my name I want to be the best known realtor in my whole area. Well, that's television. It's probably being on a channel like HGTV, but it probably means I can't do all of Tampa. It probably means I need to be right in my county. And so you start to close that in, and how much do you put toward that awareness? And then those other deeper funnel pieces, you start to add that toward it. And so you'll have a picture of what you're able to spend, right? Most businesses do. It's very seldom we talk to somebody that goes, I have unlimited budget. What should I do? So inside that budget, it really becomes an allocation around the pieces you saw before, around awareness, around consideration, around making them take activation. And don't forget creative. That's one that a lot of small businesses don't plan for, don't budget for. So making sure that you have the right creative messaging, that you're able to put that out there, because, you know, if you skimp on that piece, everything that you do down funnel will be a lot less effective.
Right. Is there a common frequency and reach number that you guys try to, is there a good, better, best that you usually present?
Sure. Well, you know, reach is really moving more and more toward impressions. You know, if you take the Tampa market, you've got roughly a 1.8 million television households, right? And so 100% reach would mean you would reach all 1.8 million, which is pretty expensive. And then, so if you start to look at maybe a number of, again, tighten it up to a county and an area, how many people do I want to reach? How many impressions? And that will give you a number by thousands of how many are seeing your message. Frequency, you know, that one changes a lot. You know, it used to be 3 to 5 times, and then it moved to 7 times. I know a lot of our research and insight group talk now that it's 20 plus exposures, meaning that with frequency just means how many different times have I seen your message. It used to be if I saw it 7 times, that's when it clicked in my mind. One of the strengths of television is with the motion, the sound, the creative, you can actually get closer. But so if you're reaching 1,000 people and you want them to see it 20 plus times, right, then you've got to have a 20,000 impression type schedule in place. And again, the closer you can target, the better you're going to be with that. But those are the type numbers. And again, those are the type things that a local account executive can really work through, and they can talk about certain zones or certain areas or certain targeting parameters or some of the over the top solutions that'll give you some exact numbers and some exact measurements to work with.
Okay.
Inside really almost any budget.
Great.
Question.
Yeah. Hi, Stacey.
This actually came in earlier and I halfway answered it, but since you're talking about distance, can TV campaigns be targeted by a certain distance from the business, certain radius?
Yes, in 2 different ways. So a company like Spectrum, we have different zones that are available, which means from a certain feed, there's a geography that those homes are actually seeing that television feed. And so it's typically, like I said, a 15 to 20 mile radius around an area. And so that's a targeted way. So it would be a 15-mile radius. So it would be Pinellas County, might be a certain zone that you would feed just that area. With the over-the-top solutions, it becomes a lot more targeted where you can start to get into closer to zip codes and groups like that. But, you know, even in the zoning, you'll have a zip code list that are getting a feed. You can even tighten it up with some of the over-the-top solutions. So, yes, very targeted with television. And definitely that's one of the ways that it's changed from the old days of television, where it was everybody watching everywhere, even if they would never drive the hour and a half to get to your business.
Great, thank
you. Right. Our last segment, again, that we'll take as many questions as we can about all segments we've been talking about, is tracking and measurement. And this often is one of the things that people tend to forget the most about. You have a great message, you think you have a great message, you think you have a great audience, you think you have a great program, but nothing. You know, the only thing that you're tracking is maybe sales. And there's so much more that can be tracked and measured to gauge success. You know, Cass, what do you think about tracking and measurement, and how does Spectrum help with that?
Sure. Well, you know, there's a lot of saying that if you can't measure it, right, you can't improve it and you can't fix it. So I would not recommend anyone to have a marketing plan where they don't understand their KPIs and what they want to impact. Brand is a tougher one because it's a longer life on how you actually measure that brand. But some of the things we talked about today around reach and frequency numbers or impressions that are delivered, that lets you know how many people are getting there. There's in-store sales that people use, and they know their traffic patterns, and they know who's coming in. They know the average close, because those are some things that happen. Site traffic is a big indicator. And then as you start to look at site traffic, you know, a lot of times you can check on things like your direct traffic, your organic traffic, people that are starting to look for you. So let's say you put a television schedule on in your area and you know that there's not been any searches or your direct traffic has not been happening at all. What you should see is you should start to see people that are coming in and starting to type in Scott Carpenter, you know, .com, because they've been seeing you and they're coming out and they're specifically looking for your business. And so I think those are some of the big kind of immediate ones. So understand what you'd like to impact. So is it certain product sales, certain product lift? Is it site traffic? Is it store traffic? Is it impressions that are being delivered? And if you're delivering impressions, you actually then can start to follow that and see how many of those impressions resulted in clicks and click-throughs and other pieces on my site. And when you start to compare those, the other piece you can compare, and I think someone brought it up on this call earlier, is around A/B testing. So different types of creative. Might I run 2 different messages and see that one actually doubles what the other one does? And you clear that out and you clean it up. So measuring your creative, as well as your platforms, your media channels, as well as your average sales, are all big key pieces of what you drive in. And it helps you determine. So if you know what you want to measure and track at the end, that actually helps you backtrack up to the question we had before around how do I build a budget and how do I build a media plan?
And you talked a little bit earlier about how Spectrum has again on the back end of the schedule, the ability to track or coordinate the ads with Google Analytics. Can you talk a second about that?
Sure. Well, and most customers keep up with their own Google Analytics, but what we have is a platform called Audience Track. So again, we are fully bought in that you need to understand how your schedule works. So there's a platform where you can actually see your commercial, the networks, the shows, other places where all your spots were airing, as well as if you're buying things like over the top, if you're buying impressions, if you're buying any of the other pieces, you can measure that creative. So you can see all those pieces as well as, and this starts to get into your question around site traffic and pieces like that. How many clicks did it generate? How many people came over that way? And you can continue to adjust it over time. So it's real time that a customer can go in and take a look at it. And then again, with an account executive, they can help talk through and go, you know what, you should really be seeing this as a benchmark. And we see this performed over, but this is starting to trend under. Maybe we need to make some changes to your schedule, or maybe we need to make some changes to your creative and help get that up. But that dashboard actually puts everything together that a customer has access to with their own in-store data or with their own website data, and then all of their media placement in one spot and creative.
Yeah, that's great. I think that is so cool, and so again, so not your grandpa's marketing schedule, because before it would take weeks, months, or store data to show any type of lift or measurement, and here you can almost get it not instantaneously, but pretty darn close.
Yeah, that's right. And it is important because it never stays the same. There's always things that you'll want to do to adjust and improve, and just make sure you're maximizing and optimizing it. And so I think it's really smart to make sure that this is in here. And I think the questions from the group have been really smart, but this is so critical to make sure that it's actually delivering and working and make changes. So often people just throw it out there and then they never make those slight tweaks or adjustments that all of a sudden can take something that's performing well and make it perform phenomenal.
Great. As we start to wrap up, we're going to get to your final questions here in a second, but we wanted to just do some quick takeaways, because again, we've been talking for an hour now, and there's so much more that could be covered, and we kind of condensed it all down for you. But it's important to have realistic goals and objectives. Again, the SBDC can help you manage that process. Spectrum's consultants can also do that. Develop a strong brand and position. Cas has mentioned it several times, and I totally agree that it is all about brand. And to have a strong brand breaks you away from the competition. It allows you to do more premium pricing. It puts you on a different trajectory than everybody else, falling within the same sea of sameness. Know your audience better than your competition. There's lots of tools out there that are available for you to really define who that audience is and really be able to target them effectively with the platforms that influence them the most. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just don't put it into one ad and say, oh, this ad failed, I'm done. Make sure that you have a variety of different messages, a variety of different mixes, all leading up to that brand position, and use the different platforms that are available, because if you don't know what your audience is consuming or being influenced by, it's important to do, as Cash was talking about, that testing out there to see what's pulling people in, that you can track and be able to then motivate, hopefully, to purchase. Commit to a plan and schedule with appropriate budget, frequency, and reach. Marketing is an investment. It's an investment into your brand, and most would say that brand is your biggest company asset that you will ever have. So consider that an investment and not a cost center. Track your results, determine what is working, what is not working. And again, Cass has talked about a lot of different things that they can do, and work the plan. A marketing plan is a living, breathing document. It's not something set in stone. So work the plan, massage it, alter it to what is working, what's not working, and we're all in this together. So hey, you can do this. We're here to help. Spectrum's here to help. All you got to do is just ask. Stace.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so final questions. We have Teresa ask, can you give us an idea? I'm surprised this didn't come in sooner. Can you give us an idea of the cost of the cheapest TV ad and how what that would look like?
Sure. Well, thank you, Teresa. And that is, as part of the field marketing group here, that's something that's one of the most common questions we get, that gets called in through our call center is, what does it cost to be on ESPN, right? And we talked a lot about the segmentation, right, and the zoning and getting tighter and tighter. So it does vary. So if you're only in one county, one zone, on one network, you can start to work with the budget. But I will tell you, Teresa, because I'm not trying to dodge your question, there just are so many variables that it makes it tough. Probably, $500 to $1,000 per month is an entry-level television schedule if you're very tightly targeted. And what I would say is if you're at that smaller end, what you look at is over a longer period of time. So if I can't commit as much each month because of budget restraints, can I look at a 6-month or a year schedule where I start to build that frequency that we talked about with an audience that's very tight? So maybe I'm only reaching 5,000 people or 10,000 people, but I'm reaching them over and over the course of a year, and they start to become my customers and they start to come in. But I do think it's a great way, even with a tight budget, to start to test your messaging, start to test it against competitors and do it. And I think the tighter your budget is, maybe the longer, Teresa, you want to look at, do I give it some time to let it build? Because if you come in and you spend a lot of money immediately, like some of these companies we've talked about today, sure, you can really get your brand to jump. But it's a pretty big commitment, and you have to wait on that to return. But you can start definitely smaller. The tighter that your zone, the less networks that you run on, and but I think you can still get the return at that amount.
Right, and as a whole too, and Cass, can correct me where I'm wrong, it is more cost effective, cheaper to have a schedule be on an ROS schedule, run a station, versus then a particular show. For instance, if you're looking for House Hunters or Property Brothers or Giada's Kitchen and want that specific network or that specific show, it's going to cost you a lot more than having a run schedule to run on Food Network somewhere else during the course of the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And good point, Scott, is and typically that's what you would look at, is you would look at something from viewing time from a 6 p.m. till midnight schedule on a range of networks that reaches the audience, Teresa, that you want to reach, right? So if you want it, you might have HGTV and DIY and maybe one other household type group. So you're still reaching that same audience, and you're doing it with a little more flexibility, which I think lets your budget go further. But good point, Scott.
Okay. Sean, in regards to the zones, Sean would like to know, can you pick any zone that is best for your product anywhere in the country? And he must have an online business.
Yeah, and Sean, good question. So yes, and the fact is that even someone right there, Spectrum Reach, we kind of look at ourselves in a couple of ways. We say that we can take local businesses and make them look big, and we can take big national businesses and make them look local. So if you're looking, Sean, at, hey, I want to show up in different markets that are better, your local expert right there in the market could take you and put you in California. They could put you in Minneapolis. They could put you in New York, or any place that you think for your type business is the best audience. We've worked with, years ago, we worked with a company that actually sold custom golf carts. And that's the way we actually worked with them. There are certain communities that only allow golf cart traffic. And we targeted them to 5 different golf cart communities over the course of a year. And they saw some big lift in their business. So yeah, I mean, that can be some really fun and creative stuff, John, and we'd love to talk to you about it if that's right for your business.
Okay. And if I butcher this name, I apologize. Rodine asks, "Hi, I've heard you mention several times about zip code lists. Where can you get those?"
Sure. Well, so a zip code list, right, tied to a television schedule, that will just tell you how many the zip codes that are included in the zone that you're buying. So when you would work with an account executive and they talk to you about your schedule, they can show you the exact coverage map, which would include all of the zip codes that you would be reaching. But a lot of times too, Rodine, what happens is where your best areas are. So a lot of times customers will come in and go, I tell you what, these are kind of the areas that we feel we have the most opportunity, and they might bring even their own zip codes, and we can do some comparison with you and take a look. Because when you start to get into some of the more targeted pieces, sometimes that's even better.
Scott, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I was going to say, if she's talking about zip code lists for like mailing lists, there are things where you can get like through Info USA and some of the big data houses. If she's thinking about direct mail, I think the importance of what Cass was talking about is being able to, again, go back to the segmentation and look at where the audience lives and is and consumes, and being able to find out what zip codes work best for you. Because if you're not focusing on a particular radius, like for instance, an air conditioning company may have one big competitor that dominates one part of a community, and so you can pick all the outliers around that through their zip codes and specifically target them instead of where the competition's at. So, and again, Spectrum has a lot of great information, but again, it's knowing about who your audience is and who you want to reach.
Yeah. And Rodine, that's one of the things we consider one of our brand pillars when we talk about who we are, right? So data and insights is one of the things that we think is a great tool to help small businesses. To your questions about zip codes and really what Scott was just referring to, we work with a lot of car dealers about by zip code what vehicles are being sold and by make and by model and other pieces. So it could be a really good conversation to take a look, specifically for your business, what you're looking at tied to zip codes and purchase.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, Samantha, when going back to tracking, Samantha would like to know how far back should you be looking at analytics?
Good question, Samantha. I'll speak personally about how we track, right, we definitely look at year-over-year growth and impact from the things that we're doing. And so typically as you start to put a foundation, so I think it becomes start with where you don't have so many outliers. So if your business has really changed, there's no point in going 5 years back and taking a look at what you did 5 years ago if now you have 5 locations and you had 1. So, outliers sometimes will do it, but definitely kind of year over year where you can look at apples to apples comparisons helps you get better and better over time. And so, if you're taking a look at leads or lead conversions or client traffic or impressions that you're delivering, site traffic, all those, you can look at those trends, like I said, year over year. And what I think that starts to let you do also is you can also see those seasonal trends and monthly trends, because almost every business category will have peak seasons and down seasons. And a lot of times with new advertisers or new businesses, they're not aware of that. And so they go, well, none of my advertising is working right now, and it's summertime, and there's just typically a lull, right, in July and August, and it picks back up after everybody gets back in school, right, or other places peak during the summer and they're down in the spring. So you can start to see those trends in your business. And so once you put that foundation in, I'd say keep tracking it over time, and it's really interesting to see how you grow and improve and get better. And definitely good, is you're a marketing lead, to be able to show your owners and bosses and other pieces that are inside of there what's going on. Or if you're an owner that's doing your own marketing, you can also start to see how you're improving and how different partners that you're working with are helping you impact the business as well.
Right, and I would add that I think seasonality is a great indicator, especially in the state of Florida, because so many businesses are seasonal, and we depend on those snowbirds to come down and buy as much as they can. But also too, I think it's important to be able to track your marketing outliers, meaning that you might have a TV campaign running from January to March, okay, but then April through May, you might be doing nothing but print ads. And be able to track the effectiveness of each one is important, because you can see where your investment is going and see what lift you're getting. Because a lot of TV schedules aren't 12 months. A lot of them are quarterly or certain peak periods. Your air conditioning companies would only probably market in the winter, because in the summertime it's probably too hot, and especially in the state of Florida, a lot of people aren't even in their homes to even need air conditioning services. So I think it's important to track year after year. It's tracked important seasonally, but also to be able to track key segments of when different media different platforms are being run, to be able to track their effectiveness.
Thank you. We got 2 questions left. Paula asks, what are the differences between cable, broadcast, and streaming services when it comes to advertising and pricing?
Okay. And Paula was the question? It was from Paula?
Paula, yes.
Okay. Well, hey, Paula. And that's one, that if you're not in the business, right? I've been around for a long time, so it's common to us, but it's a regular question. So broadcast stations are channels like ABC, NBC, CBS, and they typically work on what's called a DMA. And so right in your area, you can think of your ABC station, your NBC station, and your CBS station, and those are broadcast. And so what they do is they actually cover your full market area. And so the news that you have on there, the Bachelor, or whatever show they have, those are the shows. But when you buy in those shows, you hit everybody in those markets. So typically that's more expensive advertising, because it hits a full market area. There's not some of the segmentation that we talked about today. So those are broadcast. Cable is actually what comes through a cable service provider. And a lot of times people think like a Spectrum Reach is just Spectrum. So if we were to sell you a cable network like an HGTV, what we can actually do is it's Spectrum Home, but it's also Verizon, TNT. If there's Xfinity in the market, we're actually able to give you every HGTV home across that marketplace as well. And so that's cable. So those networks, and they're typically zoned like we mentioned before. So you can take a certain area and you only hit right around your business. So it lets it be more cost effective, because you're not hitting as many households all at once. You're able to actually be more location centric. But you can broaden it out and hit every HGTV home. So March Madness, right, which will be on TBS and TNT, right, and some of the other stuff, you could be in it. You could be right in your zone, or you could be all around Tampa across those cable networks. And then OTT, right, there's a lot of pieces there, right, the over-the-top pieces, the online streaming. So there's apps. So if you watch TV on your Spectrum app or an Xfinity app, you can actually advertise and hit those households. And we showed some numbers earlier where 13% or so of people are watching on that. So when you buy a television schedule, you can actually add on that OTT. So if those people are watching it there, you're still getting that same audience regardless of device. And then OTT really includes things like on demand. So if you're watching shows on demand that have the opportunity to put a television commercial in front of it. So just sticking with the HGTV theme. So I want to reach everybody watching Property Brothers. I could be on the network. I could also buy OTT, so when they're watching it on the app, and then also if they're watching it on demand, I could also put my commercial in front of there. So you're just getting that audience across multiple channels and multiple devices that way.
Okay, so a follow-up came into that, and it says, this is from Carol. So if someone is running a small business that's local, why would they advertise on broadcast?
Well, and a lot of times small businesses don't. If you think about the commercials that you see on your typical ABC station, it's usually car dealers, maybe it's a franchise that has multiple places all across the market, right? They have 5 stores or 10 stores. So Carol, you know, one of the pieces of advice I always give is if they won't drive an hour, right? If it just doesn't make sense that they would drive across town, focus on where your audience is first. And as you grow, or maybe have something special that would do it, you might look at it, but it's a bigger investment. But a lot of times you don't see smaller businesses necessarily using broadcast for that very reason that Carol asked, is the coverage is too broad for where their audience comes from. And so they end up wasting a lot of dollars for an audience they'll never.
But there's caveats in all markets. For instance, in the Tampa market, ABC has 2 stations. You have Tampa and Sarasota. So if you wanted to market to Sarasota, Venice, Bradenton, and not hit Tampa, Pinellas, Polk, the northern counties, you can do broadcast TV just for ABC Sarasota and not hit the Tampa audience. So there are caveats in each market. And again, that's the beauty of what Spectrum can do is to find out what's the best mix for you. But yeah, and that's the only caveat I think in the Tampa market, that is where we have 2 ABCs. We only have 1 NBC, 1 CBS, 1 Fox, but we have 2 ABCs. And so you can do a little bit of a smaller broadcast in that aspect.
Okay, guys, that's our last question for today. There are a couple of things I want to mention before we let you guys go today. First, we talked at the beginning about Spectrum's Rebuild My Town marketing speaker series that is kicking off with Marcus Lemonis this month. It's Advertising Insights into Action, live with Marcus Lemonis. It's on January 12th, next Tuesday, from 2 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. You can register using the handout that's in the handout section or the link that I provided in the chat window during today's webinar. To register for consulting, which some of you have already done that during today's webinar, so thank you for that. To register for consulting, it's no cost with the Florida SBDC at USF. Use the link provided in the chat window during today's webinar. I'll also be sending out the presentation to everyone today, the actual PowerPoint slide deck, and it includes the link on the final slide. To schedule that no-cost consultation, you're just going to go to sbdctampabay.com/schedule-consultant. Again, that is in the chat window. When you leave the webinar today, a survey will appear on your screen. Please take 2 minutes to complete this short survey, as it allows us to continue offering these webinars. And I'm constantly looking for new content to add to our webinar schedule. So if there's anything high-level marketing that you'd really like to see, Spectrum has been gracious enough to partner with us on presenting more of these webinars this year, so we'd be more than happy to get those added. Scott or Cas, any final comments you'd like to make?
You know, I would just say that, you know, that the big takeaway as what I want to stress is that any company can effectively do television advertising. There's lots of different platforms. There's lots of different ways to do it. You know, we didn't really talk about merchandising your ads, but that's the beauty of it. Before you had one ad, you played on the network, and that's the only place it lived. Now you have a great TV commercial. Now it can run on OTT, it can run on Premiere ads, it can run on pay-per-view, it can run on broadcast, it can run on so many different things. And, oh, by the way, it can be on your social, it can be on your website, and some other things. So you can do this, and there's lots of assistance there for you from the SBDC, from Spectrum. We're here to help. All you got to do is ask. We're here to help.
All right, and I just want to say thank you, and so enjoyed the time. I love to talk marketing and business. You know, my father owned some small businesses. I have a father-in-law now that has a real estate company, and I know how tricky it can be. It can be so hard to figure it out, and we're in a time right now that everyone can use all the help they can get, and sometimes just the right conversation, the right idea can make such a big difference. So I appreciate, you know, the SBDC having me on today, and it was a fun conversation. I appreciate all the businesses, and I appreciate all they do for our economies and our communities and our towns. And, you know, the Spectrum Reach team lives right in these communities, and they're a part of it. And so the success of businesses matters to everybody. So I appreciate, one, the format that you guys had today, and I appreciate the businesses that attended, and appreciate everything that everyone's done, and so much fun. But if there's ever anything that I can do, we can do, happy to to follow up with anyone.
All right, and Cas, thank you so much for joining us today and for taking the time to be with us, especially right after the long break that we've all had. I hope this was useful for you guys who are attending today, and if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to us. With that, thank you. Have a great day. Bye.